Right, hello everyone. So I just want to make this video that was left on one of my shorts about women being murdered. They said how 73% of homicide victims are men, and I want to reply to it in an actual video because it's a comment that comes up almost every time I talk about violence against women. On the surface, it sounds like a strong argument, but it only works if you ignore one crucial question, and that's who is committing those crimes? So this conversation isn't about blaming all men. It's about recognizing patterns in data, because the patterns tell us where the problem actually comes from. If we want to reduce violence, we have to be honest about who is more likely to carry it out and who is most affected and how those patterns differ between men and women. So let's break it down properly. Globally, around 90% of homicide perpetrators are men, and that's consistent around the world. In places like the US, around 85 to 90% of people arrested for homicide are men. So when we talk about violence, especially lethal violence, we're not talking about some 50-50 issue here. We are talking about something that is overwhelmingly committed by men. And that's not an opinion, that is just what the data shows. And this is where people bring up the stat that most victims are men, and that's true. Globally, around 75 to 80% of homicide victims are male. But that stat doesn't contradict the idea of male violence. It actually reinforces it, because again, who is killing those men? Other men. In many countries, the most common form of homicide is male perpetrator, male victim. So what we're seeing isn't men being targeted randomly as a group. We're seeing a pattern of male on male violence. Now, here's where things start to diverge. Men and women don't just experience violence at different rates, they experience different types of violence. So for men, violence is more likely to happen in public spaces. It often involves acquaintances, gangs, or strangers. It's also more likely to be linked to things like crime, conflict, or escalation. For women, violence is more likely to happen in private spaces and far more likely to be committed by someone they know. Globally, around 60% of women who are killed are murdered by an intimate partner or family member. For men, that number is much lower, closer to 10 to 15%. So the experience of violence isn't just about how often it happens, it's about who is doing it and in what context. So this is why terms like femicide exist, because women aren't just being killed, they are being killed in gendered ways. For example, killed by partners or ex-partners, killed after patterns of domestic abuse, and killed in situations involving control, jealousy, or possession. And in the UK, a woman is killed by a man every 3 days. That's over 100 women every single year. And globally, around 6 women are killed every hour by men, often by someone close to them. 6 every hour. That's not random violence, it's a pattern. So when people say this is a male violence problem, what do they mean? They don't mean all men are violent, they mean the majority of perpetrators are male, that these patterns of violence are consistent across societies, and the impacts are felt by both men and women. So men, more likely to be the victims of violent crimes and the perpetrators of it, while women are more likely to be victims of domestic and sexual violence, especially by someone they knew. So the same underlying issue, male violence, is affecting different groups in different ways. And if we ignore these patterns, we can't fix the problem, because solutions depend on understanding causes. If most violence is committed by men and much of it is directed at other men, then addressing male violence helps everyone. It will protect men from other men, and women from male partners, and communities as a whole. So yes, most homicide victims are men, but they are overwhelmingly killed by men. And women face a different but equally serious risk of being killed by men they know. This isn't about division, it's about recognizing a clear, evidence-based pattern that violence is overwhelmingly committed by men, and that is why it's called a male violence problem. Anyway, I will leave that here for now. Subscribe if you want, like if you want. The main thing is sharing these videos, getting this information out there. That is the most important thing. I will see you in the next one. Ta-da!